And we're live.
Welcome back to Prophecy 3 DNA, where we discover, decrypt, and demystify Bible prophecy, and then we apply it. My name is Donnie Alvarenga, and this is my brother Don, and we are honored to be your guides on this discovery of Bible prophecy. And last week, we were talking a little bit about the components of a covenant. This week, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each of those components so that we can understand it, dissect it, demystify it, and then we can apply it. And so, welcome, Don.
Hello.
Would you like to kick us off with prayer?
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here this afternoon. We can go deeper into your covenant model, Lord. The agreement that you made with the Hebrew people, and that you use the same format to make an agreement with all of us. Open our hearts and our minds that we may be willing to absorb and listen and apply the things that we learn, so we know what we've signed up for, Lord. Holy name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so here's our methodology. Again, you can pause it, take a look at it, go back to the video where we describe each of these things in depth. But we're going to go ahead and go straight into where we left off last week. So let me actually go to this slide. All right, so we came back to this slide here. Last week we went over the components. There's 7 parts to what the covenant looks like. All right, and it's in the form of a sovereign vassal agreement. Okay, and so this week we're going to go over as far as we can go on each of these things in greater detail, on each of these components, so we really understand what is it that we're signing up for when we make this covenant with God. Okay, does that make sense? So here are the 7 components. So today we're going to go into the preamble. So the preamble identifies the parties who are making a covenant. Okay, so just we can throw variables in here between X and Y. That's simple. So the agreement is between Donnie and Don. It's between Don and his wife. It's between me and my bank. Okay, so it's just the preamble just identifies the parties who are making the covenant. So in this case, the sovereign is God, or the Lord Jehovah. Okay, so he's the sovereign. So we'll look here. Go ahead and read this in Leviticus 25:55.
For to me, the children of Israel are servants. They are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God.
Okay, so this is God declaring why is it that he is sovereign? Why?
He set them free.
He set them free. Okay, so you're saying is that the children of Israel are my servants. All right, they owe me. Does that make sense? And that is Jehovah, right? So look at here, Yahweh or Yoveh, right here. The existing one, true name of the one true God. Okay, that is who it is. The vassal is the house of Jacob, the children of Israel. It's a synonym. Okay, house of Jacob, children of Israel. We can think of this as Abraham's seed. Okay, the reason I put this term Abraham's seed is because we're going to see when the new covenant is brought up, it uses this concept of Abraham's seed. All right, so they are the vassal. All right, so again, the same text. The children of Israel are God's servants. Okay. So we're going to look here, and this is the text. I'm not going to bring it up because I already wrote it out here, but that's where the actual text is. So go ahead and read the text.
Exodus 19, verses 3, 7, and 8. Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel. So Moses came and called for the elders of the people, and laid before them all these words which the Lord commanded him. Then all the people answered together and said, All that the Lord has spoken we will do. And Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord.
Okay, so we see here, you can see I color-coded them. The vassal and the sovereign. Sovereign's yellow, the vassal's brown. Okay, so here we see In Exodus, this is when the covenant is being confirmed. All right? God and the people. Okay? This is the agreement. Now, we're going to look at the prologue. And the prologue, what it does is it lists the deeds already performed by the sovereign on behalf of the vassal. Okay, so we've brought up this concept before. If a king in England knew that the countryside was being ravaged by the Vikings and he went and he rescued these people now owe him. If they refuse to fall under his sovereignty, then he'll just say, okay, then you suit yourself. Does that make sense? So again, it's something that the sovereign has already done on behalf of the vassal. This isn't something that benefits the sovereign. This is something that benefits the vassal. Does that make sense? It actually might even put the sovereign out of his way to do. Okay? So here we see again, the sovereign's the Lord. He rescued, saved, and redeemed them from slavery and bondage. Okay? The vassal were the ones who were rescued, saved, and redeemed from slavery and bondage. So we see that the vassal in this case are under slavery and bondage. And the Lord rescued them from that state. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So let's go ahead and read this.
Exodus 19, verse 4 and 20, verse 2. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I lifted you up on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage.
So did God do it with no input from them? They cried out, they prayed, right? But God is the one that took it upon himself to do it. Does that make sense?
Right.
So here specifically, I was the one that saw what the Egyptians were doing to you, slavery and bondage. So I yanked you out of there. Okay? So here, he already performed the deeds. Does that make sense? He already rescued them.
Mm-hmm.
Now we get into the stipulations. Okay? And we're going to do a whole study on what these stipulations are. It's actually probably going to be a multi-part study on these stipulations. But basically, it's the terms to be upheld by the vassal for the life of the covenant. Okay, so the stipulations are not something for the sovereign. The stipulations are something for the vassal. All right? And they are bound to this for the life of the covenant. Okay? Terms. So here, the sovereign has the authority to dictate the terms. Why does he have the authority to dictate the terms?
Because he already did his part.
He already did his part, right?
And it's all for the benefit of the vassal.
And it's for the benefit of the vassal. And then the vassals are required to obey the terms as long as they want to remain in this covenantal relationship. Okay? So, what are the statutes? We went over this before when we were just studying the everlasting gospel. There is a moral law. There are consequences to breaking the moral law. And then there's a ceremonial law to remedy the breaking of the moral law. That is where these fall into the moral law, correct? So the statutes are the moral law. They are everlasting. Just like he said, for the life of the covenant. These laws don't go away. When we look at it, these are the 10 Commandments. Ultimately, Jesus described the 10 Commandments in this way: love for God and love for each other. Right? We'll go into some of those texts. When we look at God's commandments, the first 4 commandments describe our relationship with God. The last 6 describe our relationship with each other. Being that we are all the children of God, it's our interaction with other of God's children. Does that make sense? So ultimately, if we hurt each other, we are hurting one of God's children. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So let's look here. Is this an everlasting covenant? Okay. So go ahead. Let's read this.
Psalm 111, verse 7 through 9. The works of his hands are true and just. All his commands are sure. They stand forever and ever and are done in truth and uprightness. He sent redemption to his people. He has commanded his covenant forever. Holy and fearful is his name.
So his commandments stand forever and ever. He has commanded his covenant forever. The interesting thing is that the word forever in when you're reading it in the Bible, it goes to the point of for the duration of your life. Does that make sense? So for you, it's forever, right? The day you die, the covenant is dead. But as long as you live, this covenant is bound to you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Here's another one.
Psalm 33, verse 11, the counsel of the Lord stands forever, the purposes of his heart to all generations.
And then these other ones.
Isaiah 40, verse 8, the grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God shall stand forever. Malachi 3, verse 6, for I am the Lord, I do not change. Therefore you, O sons of Jacob, are not consumed.
So these standards that God sets forth are for the duration of our lives. Does that make sense? But he has people that are going to last beyond us. So that's why he says for all generations. So subsequently, when I now have children, it falls upon them. Just like with the Israelites. When they had children, the covenant fell upon those children. Does that make sense? So, we see this idea here. Okay? Now, there are sanctions. Okay? Promises, which are operant conditioning. So remember, we brought up this concept of the carrot and the stick. Okay? There's carrots and there's sticks. Actually, let me bring this up. So let me actually bring up the Ten Commandments. So we're going to just read them to know what the stipulations were. So go ahead and read it from the beginning.
So this is Exodus 20, beginning at verse 1. Now God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself any graven idol or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water below the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of them who hate me, and showing love and kindness to thousands of them who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold guiltless anyone who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your livestock or your sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his manservant or his maidservant or his ox or his donkey or anything that is your neighbor's.
Okay. So can we tell that these are stipulations?
Yes.
Okay. These are the terms that you must follow to remain in this covenant. Okay.
Yes. Now it is interesting, and I was wondering if you're going to point this out, that if you go to verse 2, if you can bring that back up.
Sure.
It does go back to what you were talking about in terms of why does he have the authority to make these stipulations? Yep. Because he brought us out of Egypt. He brought them out of Egypt. He Correct. Is the sovereign.
Correct. And so here's another one that's interesting. When we look at the fourth commandment, it says there's another answering onto why we should keep his commandments.
Why he has the authority, right?
Why he has the authority. Why? Because in 6 days he made everything. He's the creator.
He's the creator.
So Not only is he the redeemer, he's the creator. When we look at Deuteronomy 5, which is the repeating of the law, repeating of the Ten Commandments, he says that the reason you keep the Sabbath is because the Lord redeemed you out of the land of Egypt. Again, redemption. So you have these contrasts of creator and redeemer. Mm-hmm. Okay. So go ahead and read the rest of this.
Exodus 24, is that the one?
This is just continuing what happened.
You want me to read Exodus 24? Is that the one you want me to read? Exodus 24, verse 12, the Lord said to Moses, come to me to the mountain and stay there, and I will give you the stone tablets with law and the commandments which I have written so that you may teach them.
Okay, go ahead and read that.
Exodus 31, verse 18, when he had made an end of communing with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses the 2 tablets of testimony, tablets of stone written with the finger of God.
Okay, then read the last one.
Moses,
we're gonna keep going down. Just
Exodus 32, 15 through 16, Moses turned and went down from the mountain with the 2 tablets of testimony in his hand. The tablets were written on both their sides. They were written on one side and on the other. The tablets were God's work, and the writing was God's writing engraved on the tablets. Exodus 32, 19, as soon as he came near the camp, he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger burned. So he threw the tablets from his hands and shattered them at the bottom of the mountain. Exodus 34, verse 1, now the Lord said to Moses, cut out for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will write on these tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. Exodus 34, verse 4, so he cut out 2 tablets of stone like the first, and Moses rose up early in the morning and went up to Mount Sinai, just as the Lord had commanded him, and took in his hand the 2 tablets of stone. Exodus 34, 28 through 29, so he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He did not eat bread or drink water, and he wrote on the tablets the word of the covenant, the 10 commandments. And then verse 29, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of testimony in the hands of Moses, when he came down from the mountain, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone while he talked with them.
So here's something that's interesting for you to take a look at it. Right there in blue, can you read that?
The tablets were written on both sides, both their sides. They were written on one side and on the other.
Okay, so why was that the case? So we're going to see here, later on, we're going to read about one of the things we discussed last week, which is there needs to be a copy for each person, each of the people that were interacting.
Can you go back there as well again, real quick?
Sure.
There was a verse we read just now there at the end. Scroll down a little bit more. Oops, sorry. Here we go on Exodus 34, 28 through 29. On the last part there, he says, and he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. Does it need to be any more clear what the covenant is?
Yep.
Okay.
So the reason why you'd have this writing on both sides is because whenever people made contracts back then, they would write it on both sides. So when you held it up, you're reading it just the same time the other person's reading it. So there's no mistaking. There's no shenanigans going down. That makes sense?
Yes.
Instead of you standing next to each other, reading it over each other's shoulder, you stand across from each other, and everything I'm reading on my side, you should be reading, following along on your side. Okay? So again, the words of the covenant, the stipulations of the covenant are the 10 commandments. Not 613 laws. Okay? We covered this before when we described the ceremonial system. Right? There are 10 universal moral laws that are applicable to every human being on the face of this planet. There are not 613 laws that are applicable to every human being on the face of this planet. For example, when you look at the Hebrew laws, some of them were specifically for priests. If you're not a priest, it does not apply to you. There are other laws that were for men and other laws that were for women. If you are a woman, the laws of men don't apply to you, and if you're a man, the laws of women don't apply to you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
There are laws of people that had illnesses. If you're not sick, these laws don't apply to you. God is not relative. He has standards that he wants everyone to abide by. Does that make sense? These laws, these 10 commandments, are applicable to everyone. Male, female, young, old, doesn't matter. If you're a human being, these laws apply to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, we look here, moral law are the stipulations. Later on, we're going to see what were those other laws for. Okay? So now we're going to go into the sanctions, the operant conditioning. Okay? The carrot and the stick. So again, the sovereign is Jehovah, the Lord. He is the adjudicator, okay? He is the one who dispenses mercy to the repentant and punishes the guilty. He's the arbitrator. He's the guy that defines on if you're keeping the covenant or not. Does that make sense? The vassal is the supplicant. All you have now is to ask, because you have no say other than to accept or reject. Does that make sense? So the blessings are, I will be your God, you will be my people, and I will give them my land. That's one thing that we never really think about. It was God's land to give. The land was his. It wasn't the land of the Perizzites and the Hittites and the blah blah blights. Okay? It was always God's land. So a lot of people will get hung up on, oh, God is genocidal and he wants to kill all these peoples. Like, one, study those people. See what they were doing with the land God gave them. Number two is understanding that it was always his land to begin with. And that if you're going to defame the Lord by what you do on his property, it's his right to take it away. If I rent out an apartment that is my property to somebody, and in that house they turn it into a meth lab and a crack den, am I well within my right to remove those people from my property? Yes. I don't condone what they're doing on my land. And if I don't remove them from my property, am I now in jeopardy of the crimes they commit there? Is my name defamed? If I'm going to run for office now, and they're like, well, look at Don, he was a slumlord that owned a crack den. My name gets defamed because of what they're doing on my property. Does that make sense? So, let's look here. Let's look at these blessings. Go ahead and read these couple verses.
Exodus 19, verse 5 through 6 says, now therefore, if you will faithfully obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my special possession out of all the nations, for all the earth is mine, and you will be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. Exodus 29, verse 45 through 46. I will dwell among the children of Israel and will be their God. Then they will know that I am the Lord their God who brought them out of the land of Egypt, so that I may dwell among them. I am the Lord their God.
So what is this word right here?
If.
What does that mean?
That there is an if and a then, that there's a condition.
There's conditions. There are conditions to this agreement. Go ahead and read this.
Leviticus 26, verse 12, I will walk among you and I will be your God, and you shall be my people. Leviticus 26, 45, but for their sake, I will remember the covenant with their fathers, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt in the sight of the nations, that I might be their God. I am the Lord. Genesis 17, verse 8, all the land of Canaan, where you now live as strangers, I will give to you and to your descendants for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Leviticus 20, 24, but I have said to you, you shall inherit their land, and I will give it to you to possess it, a land that flows with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, who has separated you from other peoples.
We'll just do this last one here.
Leviticus 25, verse 38, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, to give you the land of Canaan and be your God.
Actually, we'll do this one here again, because just to verse 8.
Leviticus 26, verse 3 through 8. If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, then I will give you rain in due season, and the land shall yield its increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. Your threshing shall last till the grape harvest, and the grape harvest shall last till the time of sowing. And you shall eat your bread till you are full and dwell in your land safely. I will give peace in the land, and you shall lie down for sleep, and none shall make you afraid. I will remove harmful beasts from the land, and the sword shall not go through your land. You shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by the sword. 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall put 10,000 to flight, and your enemies shall fall before you by the sword.
Okay. So you see how here it says, what is the conditions for the good stuff?
If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them.
Okay. So the carrot, keep my commandments. And do you remember when we talked about the 4 sword judgments of God? The sword, famine, wild beasts, and pestilence. Notice how all these things that are described are, you don't get those things. The sword stays away from you. The wild beasts don't mess with you. You will always have food in its right season, and you will not get sick. Does that make sense? So, I will be your God, you will be my people, and I will give them the land. Are there positives to this, to keeping God's covenant? Yes. But now we'll see the curses. They will be the recipients of God's four-sword judgments, and he will expel them from his land. Does that make sense? There's a reason he expelled the people that were there when you showed up. Does that make sense? So now, let's look here at the curses. And what does this start out with?
But if, so Leviticus 26:14-38. But if you will not listen to me and will not do all these commandments, if you despise my statutes, or if you abhor my judgments, so that you will not do all my commandments, but you break my covenant, then I will do this to you. I will visit you with terror, with wasting disease, and with a fever that shall consume the eyes and cause sorrow of heart. And you shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. I will set my face against you, and you shall be slain before your enemies. They that hate you shall reign over you, and you shall flee when none pursues you. If you will not yet listen to me after this, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. I will break the pride of your power, and I will make your heaven as iron and your land as bronze. Your strength shall be spent in vain, for your land shall not yield her increase, nor shall the trees of the land yield their fruits.
So give it just 1 second before you continue. So he sends these things in hopes of what? What does it say right there?
Listen to me after all this, hoping that they will listen.
So why is he sending these things?
With an intent to catch their attention.
To catch their attention, to remember, why are all these bad things happening to us? So think about it this way. A lot of times in our life, we think, why are all these bad things happening to us? Why is it that these horrible things are happening to our country, our society? Could it be that we are not living up to our covenant? As a nation, as a group of people, as Christians. Does that make sense?
And then on the flip side, you have people like the story of Job, right? That have a lot of terrible things that happen to them, but they were faithful and they were, good. So how do we explain that?
So Job, we can see, is a one-off story. There's no other story like Job in Scripture. Does that make sense? So that shows you the interaction between God and Satan. Who wants to see you suffer? Is it God or Satan? Think about the Job story.
Satan.
Satan wants to see you suffer. Right? And why is it that he wanted Job specifically to suffer? Because he was faithful.
Because he was saying that Job was faithful because he was blessed.
Correct. So, what did God show in this whole exchange? Job is faithful to me not just because I give him stuff. He's faithful to me because Job says, yet he kills me, I will not stray.
It's kind of the question of what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Am I loyal to God first, or does God bless me first? And what Job said is, regardless of God's blessing, I am loyal, right?
Correct.
And that's ultimately what God wants, right? But what I get from Job's story is the fact that, just like you said, there is an enemy of our souls that wants to destroy us and wants us to suffer. And sometimes bad things happen to good people because we happen to live in a sinful world. And Satan is still trying to claim his space, okay? And unfortunately, as long as we live on planet Earth, he's going to have some sway. God is ultimately in control, but bad things happen to good people. Satan wants to twist everything that God does. So I think that in this statement here, right, which says, God is going to bless you if you obey, and he's going to curse you if you don't. That's essentially what Job's friends came to tell him. What did you do wrong? Curse God and die, right? And that's where a lot of people suffer today. Sometimes they've been doing good and they suffer because Satan wants to misrepresent God. He wants to misrepresent God. So I think that it's important that we understand all of this in that light as well, that it's not just because you're going to obey God that life is going to be peaches and cream. Actually, Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble, right? However, the question is, why are we loyal? Because he created us and because he set us free, period. We're not loyal for the blessings. We're loyal because he deserves it. And then he will bless us. In the end, he wins. In the end, the blessings are absolutely irrevocable, right? The blessings, he always wins.
So the best way we can contrast what God is describing about these 4 sword judgments and what happened to Job is Job knew he was doing the right thing. He constantly saying is like, I am doing what God says to do. I don't know why I'm receiving the 4 sword judgments, because Job received them. He received a pestilence, did he not? Raiders came and killed his children. The storms came and destroyed his crops, right? The only thing is he wasn't conquered, so there was no beasts. But ultimately, Job is like, why am I receiving the 4 sword judgments? There's an injustice going on here. That's why he constantly saying, let the Lord be my judge, when you read the entire book of Job. So, if we can say, I am doing everything the Lord says in his covenant to do, and we're experiencing these things, we're going through some trials. But if we look in the mirror and we look at his commandments and we're not keeping it, there's the difference. Does that make sense? Job constantly said, I am doing what the Lord wants me to. And he was right.
This is the other piece that I think is, I wonder, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, is the idea that there was corporate punishment, right? So there was Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham said, if there was, 50 people, would he save the city? And God was willing to save the entire city for 50 people. I can't remember what was the first number, so please don't quote me on the exact number, but I know that he went from 50 down to like 20, down to 10. God said, yes, what was it, 5?
5.
If there are 5 righteous people, God was willing to bless the entire nation for the sake of 5. And yet, unfortunately, there were no 5. So what ended up happening was that even if there was 1 or 2, they had the corporate punishment. And so this is the other piece of the equation, I think, that falls in. Like you said, when we think of our nation, if we're thinking about the United States, right? As a corporate nation, are we following these commandments? And is it possible that as a nation, not as an individual, that we may be experiencing some of this for the sake of the corporate?
And if we look at history, you can see that the nations and empires that have risen and fallen, every single one of them were because they were neglecting this. So let's look here. So we saw here in verse 18, it says, if you still don't listen to me, then more will come. Now let's look at and see where you stopped off in verse 21. What does it say right there?
What chapter are we on again? I'm sorry, I can't see the top. So Leviticus 26, verse 21, if you continue to walk contrary to me and will not listen to me, I will bring 7 times more plagues upon you according to your sins. I will send wild beasts among you, which shall rob you of your children, destroy your livestock, and make you few in number, and your roads shall be desolate. And if by these things you are not turned to me, but walk contrary to me, then I will walk contrary to you and will punish you yet 7 times for your sins. I will bring a sword upon you that shall exact vengeance for my covenant. And when you are gathered together within your cities, I will send pestilence among you, and you shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy. When I have broken the supply of your bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall ration your bread again by weight, and you shall eat and not be satisfied. If you will not listen to me for all this, but walk contrary to me, then I will walk contrary to you also in fury, and I myself will chastise you 7 times for your sins. You shall eat the flesh of your sons and the flesh of your daughters. I will destroy your high places and cut down your images and cast your funeral offerings on the lifeless forms of your idols. I shall abhor you. I will make your cities a waste and bring your sanctuaries to desolation. And I will not smell the savor of your fragrant offerings. I will bring the land into desolation, and your enemies that dwell there shall be astonished at it. I will scatter you among the nations, and I will draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be desolate and your cities a waste. Then the land shall enjoy its Sabbaths as long as it lies desolate, while you are in your enemy's land. Then the land shall rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. As long as it lies desolate, it shall rest, because it did not rest during your Sabbaths when you lived upon it. And on those who are left alive of you, I will send faintness into their hearts in the lands of their enemies, and the sound of a shaken leaf shall make them flee, and they shall flee as from a sword, and they shall fall when no one pursues. They shall fall one upon another as to escape before the sword, though no one pursues, and you shall have no power to stand before your enemies. You shall perish among the nations, and the land of your enemies shall consume you.
Okay, so this is actually a very interesting thing, because it's also a prophecy of what happened when the children of Israel were taken captive to Babylon. So much so that where it says, when the land shall enjoy its Sabbaths as long as it lies desolate, this is something that the prophet Jeremiah said as to why they would be in Babylonian captivity for 70 years. Okay? So, they are the recipient of these 4 sore judgments. So go ahead and we'll read only a couple of these things here. Go ahead, we'll read these 2 in Ezekiel.
Ezekiel 5:11 through 13. Therefore, as I live, says the Lord God, surely because you have defiled my sanctuary with all your detestable things and with all your abominations, therefore I will also diminish
Start
you.
here at the top one.
Oh, I'm
Ezekiel
sorry.
14.
Ezekiel 14, verse 21. For thus says the Lord God, how much more when I send my 4 sore judgments on Jerusalem, the sword and the famine and the wild beasts and the pestilence, to cut off man and beast from it.
And then now
Ezekiel 5:11 through 13. Therefore, as I live, says the Lord God, surely because you have defiled my sanctuary with all your detestable things and with all your abominations, therefore I will also diminish you, and my eye shall have no pity, nor will I spare. A third part of you shall die by pestilence or by famine. They shall be consumed in your midst, and a third part shall fall by the sword all around you, and I will scatter a third part into all the winds, and I will draw out a sword after them. Thus my anger shall be accomplished, and I will cause my fury to rest upon them, and I will be comforted. Then they shall know that I, the Lord, have spoken it in my zeal when I have accomplished my fury in them.
Okay, so we see here that there is famine, right? Wild beasts, pestilence, and the sword. All right? We can think of it this way. Pestilence, diseases, right? Famine are, you can think of anything that's going to prevent you from getting food. So it can either, and it's usually something related to nature. So it could just be no rain. It could be an earthquake. It could be a hurricane that comes in and destroys everything, right? Things that prevent you from being able to normally eat. So weather-related phenomena, okay? Wild beasts is the concept of being actually consumed and spread out. So here you see where it says a third part cast to the winds. What does that mean? They will take you and send you somewhere else. You will be fully conquered. And the sword just means wars or persecution. Right? So you can have wars without actually being conquered. Does that make sense? How many times through history have we had wars without countries actually beating each other? You just have strife.
So I am studying with my kids about the ancient world, right? And so they're learning about ancient Greece and ancient Rome and some of their belief systems, including the Roman gods and the Greek gods and all of these things. And it's interesting how they attributed human characteristics to those gods. And so basically they made their gods like them. And I think that sometimes as human beings, we tend to do that when it comes to the one true God, is that we try to attribute human characteristics to him when he is not human and he does not function as a human does. And so when people hear, like when I read those words, like his fury is that, can we go back to that screen again? Said, what is it? Here we go. I will cause my fury to rest upon them and I will be comforted. It's almost like I'm so angry and I must, punch a wall. You know what I'm saying? I need to get it out. And I think that this is where people say that in the Old Testament God is different from the New Testament God. But when we see the whole picture and we get to know who God really is, there's the if and then. And it says, this I can bless you. I want to bless you. I desperately want to be with you. I'm going out of my way. I'm being completely uncomfortable. I'm willing to die to be with you, right? This is the essence of the gospel, right? Is that sacrificial love that will go out of its way, right? But this is the deal. If he's gone out of his way, if he's done absolutely everything that he can do to get your attention and to say, I love you and I want to be with you. And we say, no, thank you. More often than not, when we say no, we don't say thank you. We're like, not interested, right? Mm-hmm. Well, then God is going to say, well, you know what? I did everything. You didn't want it. So here you have it. This is what you want. You get to choose. I'm giving you a choice. Which do you want? Right. I just think that there is that tendency we have to put human characteristics in God. And I think that it's so important that we study who God is, because God is who he is, not who we think he is. And God is love. And I think that it's very interesting in you pointing out that as he's describing the things that will happen if you choose against him, it's like, and if you still don't listen, okay? And so every single thing that's happening is an extra layer of attempt to say, please, I want to bless you, right? I want to bless you. Please let me bless you. And if we say no, then what can he do? And I think that it's important that we understand both sides of God, because the truth is that he is just. He is just, period. But what's amazing in his justice is that he is love. And that's where it's so difficult for us to comprehend as human beings, because oftentimes we're like, if we love, then we just sweep things under the rug. God doesn't sweep things under the rug.
And that's not real love either.
Right, that's not real love either. Exactly. He wants to address it. And yet in his love, he shows mercy. But mercy does not make him a doormat. We shove things under the rug, and sometimes we want to say that God is a doormat. He is not. He's no doormat, right? And so he's going to address the things. He's going to offer grace. He's going to offer mercy. He's going to offer love, and he's going to go out of his way, and he's going to do it over and over and over and over and over and over. And at some point, he's going to say, you chose.
And he gives you exactly what you want. So yes. I'm just going to give it an idea. The Israelites, they spent 40 years in the desert. Why did they spend 40 years in the desert? Because they didn't want the land God gave them. And they said, we would rather die in the desert than go into that land. So God ultimately gave them exactly what they were asking for. He knew that what they wanted was prejudicial to their own health, right? But because of their behavior and their constant desire to one-up God, their pride, and to attack his anointed, Moses, okay? Moses came back and through extreme peril to deliver them, right? God knew the risks that Moses took to come back and rescue them. But yet, he did it. And they kept turning on him. And they kept saying, we much rather be slaves in Egypt. So God is like, look, I took it upon myself through a lot of pain and suffering, because you know what? I also love the Egyptians. I love them. But because they failed to, they didn't adhere to my covenant. They didn't love me and they didn't love you. That's my covenant in and of its essence. And so what are you doing now? You're not loving me and you're not loving the people I put in charge of you. So therefore, I'm going to give you exactly what you're asking for. 40 more years of this.
And the other side of that coin as well is that God said, here's the land, go take it. They were more afraid of what they saw than they were of God's provision, of his promise, right? They were looking at what they could see. They were not looking what God could do. And just when he sent Moses, Moses immediately said, I can't talk, right? He saw some of the peril he was going to put himself in. God provided him assurance and just said, go do it, dude, go do it, right? And Moses obeyed. Was Moses afraid? I think so. Yet he stood in his human fear. He leaned on God's power. And so that's where God was putting the people of Israel in that position again to say, I delivered you from Egypt. I helped you cross the water. I've provided you all this evidence, and we left there to come here. This is the end game. You want in? Go take it. Just go take it. It's yours. And what they saw instead was what was in front of them, was the obstacles, right? And they did not listen to God. And I think that when we do that, we get distracted by what can provide for us, and we lose sight of that if then. We lose sight of who is ultimately in charge. We lose sight that God is for us, not against us. And that's really what I wanted to point out as we're reading about all of this pestilence and all of this tragedy, is that we don't lose sight of the fact that God is for us, and that all of these things happen after he has tried and tried and tried and tried and tried. And ultimately, he gives us what we want. And so that we may really, my challenge is that we not do that.
Yeah. All right. So now we're going to go through, and we're almost done here. So we have the witnesses. Okay. These witnesses testify to the validity of the agreement, and they must be from heaven and earth. So let's click here and take a look. Go ahead and read that.
Exodus 20, verse 18 through 21, all the people witnessed the thunder and the lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. They said to Moses, you speak to us and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die. Moses said to the people, do not fear, for God has come to test you, so that the fear of him may be before you, so that you do not sin. The people stood a distance away as Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was.
So we can see here that when this is right, Exodus 20. So this is right after the 10 Commandments are spoken by God. So who witnessed it? The people witnessed it, did they not?
Yeah.
Who else witnessed it? Where do you think these trumpets were being piped from? Was it God when he was speaking that trumpets were being piped? Or was it the thousands of angels that are right there with him? So right here, when God gives the 10 Commandments, the people witnessed it, and so do celestial beings. They witnessed it. Okay? And here's something that's interesting. Why did God use this incredible visual, like, I've been to concerts where I'm like completely like visual sensory overload. Why would God give this sensory overload thing to these people where they're like, I don't even want God to speak to me anymore? So that we fear him so we do not sin. We don't have reverence for God anymore because we believe we can just sin willy-nilly.
Because we think he's a doormat.
Right? So we forget this idea of, why did Jesus have to die? He had to die because of our sins. Right? And so we shouldn't take sin so lightly.
I never stopped to think about that verse 18 where it says all the people witnessed the thunder and the lightning. So nature witnessed, like spoke to it. Yep. And then the sound of the trumpet is what you're saying, celestial beings, and the mountain smoking.
And an earthquake.
And where's the earthquake?
Well, this is before, but when you read it in verse 19, there was also an earthquake.
So bottom line is that all of these things were testifying to the majesty of God. Yeah. The sovereignty of God. Okay. And as human beings, I don't think that we're not used to that level of power. We're not used to that level of sovereignty, of submission, all of that, right? And so it stirs up those feelings inside of us. But I think that that's what you just said is so powerful, is that we don't reverence God the way that he deserves.
So here we're going to see, why do we need so many witnesses? So go ahead and read these verses in Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy 19:15, a single witness must not rise up a single witness must not rise up against a man on account of any iniquity or any sin that he sins. A testimony of 2 witnesses or at the testimony of 3 witnesses shall the matter be established.
All right, go ahead and read this.
Deuteronomy 17, verse 6 through 7, on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, he that is to die must be put to death. But on the testimony of 1 witness, he cannot be put to death. The hands of the witnesses shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hands of the people of all the people. So you shall purge the evil from among you.
Okay, so whenever you're going to make any kind of legal agreement or to validate that something was
Judgment.
an actual fact, you need at least 2 witnesses.
So
Right?
legal judgment, right?
Correct. So God cannot be one of those parties, but the earth can and heaven can. So every time these exchanges are going down, you have the human beings and you have the celestial beings that witness this. And so therefore, you can't say that it didn't happen. Does that make sense? All right. So we'll read this here in Deuteronomy, these next 2.
Deuteronomy 31, verse 28, gather to me all the elders of your tribes and your officers, so that I may speak these words in their hearing, call heaven and earth to witness against them.
Okay.
Deuteronomy 4, verse 25 through 27, when you produce children and grandchildren, and you have remained a long time in the land, and you corrupt yourselves and make a graven image or the likeness of anything, and do evil in the sight of the Lord your God to provoke him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that you will surely and suddenly perish from off the land that you are going that you're going across the Jordan to possess. You will not prolong your days on it, but shall be completely destroyed. The Lord shall scatter you among the peoples, and you shall be left few in number among the nations where the Lord shall lead you.
So who are always witnesses in these exchanges between God and men?
Heaven and earth.
Heaven and earth. Okay. When later on, we're going to read in Revelation where God finally starts punishing the wicked at the very end of time. You know who his biggest cheerleaders are? The angels. And those who are rescued by him. Why is that? Because they've seen the injustices that we have perpetrated. And now we see God's justice come to fruition. And so they're like, good, finally. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But what has that said about God himself? That he is long-suffering and he doesn't want to do it. He's like, I will do this as literally the last resort. Does that make sense? So for God, it's like, I'm not going to take you and wreck you on one. I'm going to work with you and I'm going to punish you. I'm going to chastise you because I'm your father and I have that right. Right? But ultimately, what is he trying to have us do? Fall back in line with his covenant, because he knows if we love God and we love each other, we're too busy to hurt each other. Does that make sense? But if we don't love God and we don't love each other, all we're doing is taking our time to hurt each other. And that is not a standard of governance God can tolerate. Because every person I hurt is his child. Does that make sense? So here we'll look again. The sovereign, the Lord God, and his celestial beings. And then the vassal, the Israelites, and their elders. Okay? So all the people witnesses the thundering and the lightning and the sounds of trumpets and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. Then Moses went up, and Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel. Here are the earthly witnesses. Here are the celestial witnesses. Does that make sense? There is a document clause. So a proof of the covenant, and each party gets a copy of the agreement. A copy of the treaty was to be read aloud periodically for renewal. Okay? So the sovereign, the Lord, his copy is retained in heaven. Heaven, you say? That's crazy. Actually, let's look at it. Go ahead and read this. This is in the book of Revelation.
Revelation 11:19, then the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in his temple. And there came lightning, noises, thundering, an earthquake, and great hail.
So is there an ark of his covenant in heaven?
Yes.
Why would there possibly be an ark of a covenant in heaven if there's no covenant to be participated in? What's more important, the box or the contents of the box?
The contents.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and we did an entire study on how the sanctuary was established based on the standard and the real thing. It was a copy. It was a model of what's in heaven.
Okay. So the vassal, their copies retain in the earthly sanctuary, the Ark of the Covenant, on earth. So just like you said, there's a verse, I wish I'd put it on here, where God tells Abraham, everything you've seen.
Moses, right?
Moses. He says, everything you've seen, I want you to replicate on earth. Meaning Moses saw what it looked like in heaven. And so now he was trying to replicate it on earth. Okay? So go ahead and read this.
I was looking to see if I can find the verse, but didn't find it quickly enough. Okay, so Exodus 40 verse 20 through 21. He took the testimony and put it into the ark, attached the poles to the ark, and put the mercy seat on top of the ark. And he brought the ark into the tabernacle and set up the veil of the screening and screened the ark of the testimony, just as the Lord commanded Moses.
So what went inside of the ark? The testimony. The 10 Commandments. Okay. Now we get to the sacrificial offering. This was designed to show their participation in the covenant. The vassal assumes blood guilt for violating the covenant terms. This is an automatic assumption of guilt. Okay? We can think of this almost as bail. All right? We can post bail and we get out of jail. But the minute we don't show up to our court-appointed whatever, date, the bail bond loses that money and the court automatically keeps it. Does that make sense? So let's look here at this concept of blood guilt. Go ahead.
Exodus 24, verse 3 through 8. Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances. Then all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord has said we will do. Moses wrote all the words of the Lord and rose up early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. He sent young Israelite men who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of young bulls to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. He took the book of the covenant and read in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has said we will do, and we will be obedient. So Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, this is the blood of the covenant, which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words.
Okay. Here's one I want you to take a look at. In this story in the book of Kings, go ahead and read these two here in Kings, then I'll give the whole preamble, the whole story behind it. Go ahead.
Okay, so 1 Kings 2, verse 33, therefore their blood shall return upon the head of Joab and upon the head of his seed forever, but upon David and upon his seed and upon his house and upon his throne shall the peace of the Lord rest forever. And 1 Kings 2:37, for on the day you go out and pass over the Kidron Valley, know for certain that you will surely die. Your blood shall be on your own head.
Okay, so this whole exchange here might not make too much sense to you, but this guy named Joab rebelled against King David because he was of the family of Saul, and he felt that it wasn't fair that Saul's family wasn't in charge of Israel anymore. So he rebelled, was in open rebellion against David. David forgave him. And his son Solomon didn't like Joab because of this. So what he said was, look, as long as you stay in my territory, aka I can keep my eye on you, we're good. But if you ever cross over the Kidron Valley, you're dead. Crossing over the Kidron Valley is you assuming your own guilt for treason. Because why? Why is that such a hard concept? Well, because the idea was if he has to leave Jerusalem, it's because he's trying to gain more people for his cause. He's going to go out into the countryside and he's going to rebel now against Solomon, right? Because David's like, please don't kill him, I forgave him. Solomon's like, okay, I won't kill him if he remains in Jerusalem and I can keep my eye on him. But the minute he crosses over the Kidron Valley, he's guilty and he's dead. That's why he said right here, your blood will be on your own head. Why is that? As long as he remains in Jerusalem, he's fine. Ultimately, Joab crosses the Kidron Valley and he gets killed. So Solomon alleviates himself from that guilt because he did it to himself. He could have very easily have spent the rest of his life in Jerusalem comfortably. But instead, he decided he wanted to rebel.
I was just thinking of the statement, something that's signed in blood,
Yep.
I don't know that it was relevant to this, or maybe the whole term signed in blood came from something like this. But the bottom line is that something that is signed in blood is something that's a very significant, serious oath or promise. Correct?
Correct.
And
So
go ahead.
here we have, again, the interaction between the sovereign and the vessel. The sovereign, it's a prejudgment of guilt for covenant violators. And for the vassal, they stand condemned as covenant violators. Okay? So now we see that a sacrifice was being held. Ordinances, ceremonial laws that were meant to be temporary. So let's look at here real quick. We studied this before, how the moral law is everlasting for the duration of the covenant. We will see how these laws are not meant to be everlasting. Okay? Let's see. Read here verse 27. Correct. But just read here verse 27.
Post that link down below. But and he shall make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the offering to cease. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate until the decreed destruction is poured out on the desolator.
So this he is the Messiah the Prince. He will cause the sacrifice and offerings to cease. So because he now takes the place of the blood that we deserved on our own head, Christ took on his. Does that make sense? So these are the rituals that God gave them to ensure that they can remain in good standing and reconciliation with him. He knew that they would eventually screw up. That's why he brought in a process where they can reconcile with God. But his intent wasn't that you need to keep these sacrifices all the time. He's like, I want you to not have to do these sacrifices. And by that, I mean, stop sinning. Does that make sense? And that was the Passover, the unleavened bread, the first fruits, Pentecost, the daily, trumpets, atonements, all that stuff. Okay? He's like, look, I don't want this to have to continue forever. Because I want a change in here that's going to stop you from having to do this stuff. And that's why you have something like this, right? Where he took the blood and he sprinkled it on the people, saying, you are assuming your own guilt. Why? What did they say before? All that the Lord had said we will do and we will be obedient. They promised they would, but they couldn't. So we have here, we confess our sin. I've shown this before. There is a sacrificial offering, so that blood now covers our confessed sins. Then there's repentance, and this is what we continually forget, which means we no longer need to confess sins because we stopped that sin. Then there's salvation.
And this is, once again, another thing that we've talked a little bit about, but I think it bears saying that we understand that it feels impossible sometimes to stop sinning. And the beauty of it is that not only does God ask us to not sin, but he also equips us to not do so. And so it actually requires us leaning on him for all of it. Honestly, it requires us to lean on him for all of it. And that is the essence of grace.
So just give us a recap and then we'll close in prayer.
So we've been talking about the parts of a covenant, right? To find out, is this biblical covenant, does it fit into the requirements of what a covenant is? And we exhausted that, right? That every single component of a legit covenant is covered in the 10 commandments. Ultimately, there's the if then, there's the who's involved in the agreement, there's the terms of the agreement, there's all of the things. And so yeah,
Yeah, and so one of the things I want us to think about is if there was an old covenant, there is a new covenant. Did the component parts of the covenant change? No. For it to be a covenant, every component part must be there. So a lot of us will claim to be new covenant Christians. Okay? But we don't know what we've signed up for. You understand that by saying, I am a new covenant Christian, that blood is being thrown on our heads. Does that make sense? We can find ourselves guilty of violating that covenant when we don't know what the stipulations are. So I think that's very important. We've covered what the old covenant looks like. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to cover what the new covenant looks like. But what we're going to focus on the next couple of sessions are the stipulations. We're going to go through each of the 10 commandments. And we're going to find out what exactly does it mean when God says, I am God and there is no other. You shall have no gods before me. What does it mean by that? When God says, don't worship idols. What does that mean? Because the Bible gives us amplifying information on each one of those things that maybe we're doing by mistake or we're neglecting it some way. Does that make sense?
Can you bring up that little diagram again? I definitely want us to remember as we start going through this covenant is that we understand that we are saved by grace. The only way we are saved is because Jesus died. Because Jesus died, he covered our sins. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Okay. However, that is not an excuse for us to continue doing the things that put him on the cross. And if the things I do put him on the cross, then I want to learn what those are so I can stop doing them. And so that's essentially the essence of what we're going to be doing is understanding what are the terms of that covenant, not because we're going to work our ways into heaven, not because we're going to obey our way into heaven, but because our obedience is evidence of our allegiance. Our obedience is evidence of our love. And that's what we want to do, right? If we're new covenant Christians, if we are Christians at all, then what we're saying is I follow Jesus. And if I follow Jesus, what does that mean? What does that look like? And that's what we're talking about.
Amen. All right. Can you pray for us, please?
Our Father in heaven, thank you so much for going so far out of your way to let us know how much you love us. Thank you so much for going so far out of your way to let us know how much you want to be with us. Lord, we pray that you help us to surrender our human understanding and our human desires to surrender to your will and to your desires, because we know that that is where we are safest. We know that that is where we want to be. Thank you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.